Indeed.
So give me just a second to get situated on my end here. There we go. Okay. And can you guys all hear me okay? Sometimes the audio. Okay, cool. So good morning and thank you all for attending this morning's breakout session. My name is Dr. Derek Van Volley. I am one of the suicide prevention coordinators at the Battle Creek VA. I'm also, along with Chaplain Lepley, I'm also in the Michigan Army National Guard, currently serving as a state behavioral health officer. I have about 20 plus years of service in the military. A lot of that was on active duty, pounding the ground as an infantry dude and an artillery officer. Also do some work out of the Mercy Hospital in Muskegon, doing psychiatric evaluations in the emergency department, and I do some teaching at Grand Valley State. So, and during this presentation, if you guys have any questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them. I want this to be more of a dialogue. So any questions or concerns during the presentation, just go ahead and ask, and I'll do my best to try to answer them as we go. So in this training, you'll have a general understanding of the scope of suicide in the United States, how to identify a veteran who may be at risk, and know what to do. So the program is really focused on preventing suicide attempts, saving lives that otherwise might be lost. And the purpose is to train so you can be considered a gatekeeper. So just a little bit about the suicide prevention team and program. 400 of us nationwide. There's 3 of us at the Battle Creek VA. I cover the Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Ludington, Baldwin, Big Rapids area. We do a lot with direct patient care for veterans who are high risk for suicide. We actually put a flag on their chart that when their chart pops up, it flashes at them, and anybody who gets into their chart, that is identified, quickly. In most cases, the veterans had a serious attempt or a preparatory behavior, which means they've tried and had intent, but something interrupted or stopped them. We also do a lot of community outreach with partners, providing education, and we do a lot of tracking to outside agencies and VA staff. We do a lot of monitoring and oversight. We oversee implementation of suicide prevention strategies within the medical center to help ensure that all appropriate measures are being taken to prevent suicide in our patient population. We're also responsible for tracking and reporting all suicide attempts and completions at our facility, including the submission to a monthly report to the National Suicide Prevention Coordinator. So kind of the bottom line up front, suicide and suicide prevention has been like a hot button red light issue in the VA for probably the last 7 or 8 years, really consistently. And that means there's a lot of information gathering, a lot of reporting that has to go up and down the chain. And we are part of those report gatherers, information gatherers, program managers at the local level. One of the key components that we have is the Veterans Crisis Line, the VCL. It was started in 2007. And since then, there's been almost 5 million calls and more than 585,000 online chats, 184,000 texts. Their efforts have resulted in the dispatch of more than 897,000 services. So it started in 2007 as the Suicide Prevention Crisis Line, and it didn't change until the Veterans Crisis Line until 2010. It has its hub up in Canaluga, New York, added a second hub in Atlanta in 2017, and the third hub in Topeka, Kansas in 2018. And years ago, and I've done presentations or quite honestly, I've got the hell beaten out of me because people will say they've called the crisis line and they've been put on hold or they've gotten bad responses. Um, and what I can say to that is, if that's your experience, that's been your experience. And, the VA has tried to reconcile that by um, adding additional support personnel um, to include a lot of veterans responding to the calls. The nice thing about the crisis line is um, you can call 24 hours a day and a licensed provider will answer the phone. And you don't have to be the veteran that calls. It can be the family member. It can be a concerned individual. I just gave a suicide presentation, a drill last weekend. And, some guard members don't qualify for VA services, but they can still call the crisis line and get assistance that way. And, if you're in the Grand Rapids, Muskegon, um, Mason County, Lake County, Acosta County area, I follow up personally. So that's one thing that we local suicide prevention coordinators do is follow up locally to make sure that whatever that need was, whether you qualify for VA services or not, that we follow up locally to make sure that you don't fall through the cracks and that there's like a lukewarm handoff if there's like mental health care that needs to happen or a referral to the community. So transitioning into some facts about suicide. So people may not realize that suicide is actually a major public health concern, particular concern about veterans. It affects many Americans and people around the world. The VA is a leader in suicide prevention. However, most veterans who die by suicide are not in VA care. It's one of the reasons that the VA Save Gatekeeper training is so important. It's a tool for reaching more veterans and others who are at risk. The VA Save training, not just for VA staff, but also for people outside the VA and all over the country. So suicide is a national issue. Rising rates of suicide in the general population. In addition, the suicide rates are higher and rising faster among veterans than among non-veteran adults. Suicide is one of the heartbreaking deals, and I can tell you, this week alone, between today and this time last week, we've had 3 completed suicides. With veterans that we work with, and the part that is just, I'm going to use a non-academic clinical word here. It just sucks because I'm in my early 40s, and these guys are just babies. 2 of them are in their early 20s, and one isn't much older than that. And we have to go in and do what's called a forensic autopsy, looking at things that maybe could have been done differently or stressors, or we just collect and go in and get a lot of data. And the thing that is even more heartbreaking is for every suicide, there's like 135 people who are impacted by that on average. And if you're that young, and we'll get into this a little bit later, most of the issues that people go through when they decide to make that ultimate choice, it's usually preventable. Our nation grieves with each suicide, necessarily prompting the collective tireless pursuit of evidence-based clinical interventions and community prevention strategies critical to the strategy that we've developed at preventing veteran suicides. And that goes into the public health model we are currently using at the VA, where we're really walking hand in hand with our community partners to really reach those veterans who maybe aren't using the VA. So from 2005 to 2018, this chart shows adult and veteran population, the suicide count. There was a 47.1% increase in the number of suicide deaths in the general population, and a 6.3% increase in the number of suicide deaths in the veteran population. From 2017 to 2018, there was a 2.5% increase in the number of suicide deaths, from 43,390 to 46,510. and a 0.7% increase in the US adult population. And my purpose today is not to kill you guys with statistics and numbers, but these are just more for information purposes, to kind of show you where we've been, kind of show you where we're at. The next slide shows that, this is a national problem. There's more than 46,000 US deaths from suicide per year. It's the 10th leading cause of death. And it's the only cause of death that's not going down. So like cardiovascular disease, all these other, top 10 causes of death, there are implemented measures that are causing these to go down. Suicide's the only one that's going up. There's more than 16,000 US deaths from homicide, 1/3 the number of annual suicides, and homicide is the 15th leading cause of death in the US. Every 12.3 minutes, someone has died by suicide. I've got my timer going to keep myself on track, and we're about 1 minute away in this presentation from somebody taking their own life. So, kind of puts things into perspective. It's estimated that close to 1 million people make a suicide attempt a year, one attempt every 35 seconds. So there's some disparities in the genders. Women attempt 3 times more often than men, but men die almost 4 times as often as women. And that is directly contributed to the means. Men are more likely to use more violent and lethal means like firearms. Females are more likely to use more passive means such as overdosing. However, the past couple of years, the data has been trending in a different direction for females. In 2019, firearms and poisoning have become the number 1 and number 2 leading methods for women taking their own lives, which, where we sit in the suicide prevention arena is quite disturbing. A few more facts about suicide with veterans. 18% of all deaths by suicide among US adults were veterans or service members. 20 veterans or service members die every day by suicide. 14 out of the 20 have never been enrolled in VA care. So, that's disturbing because a lot of the data we pull are on that 6 out of 20. And that 14 out of 20, we have some idea from medical examiners' reports, but we really don't have good data nor indicators. In 2017, the suicidal rate for veterans was 1.5 times higher than non-veteran adults. Veterans are more likely than the general population to use firearms. And 25% of the veteran suicides have a history of a previous suicide attempt. And one point that I'll make here is kind of the catch phrase or popular thing is 22 veterans a day die by suicide. That's really not an accurate number and never really has been. A study one of the first studies that came out that indicated 22 a day, that study only took numbers from about 25 states. And a couple of the states that they didn't include were Texas and Florida. Well, those happen to be pretty veteran-dense states. So when research was done and data was collected from all 50 states, the number was 20. So when people hear, we go and they do these presentations and people hear 20, they get excited and they think, wow, man, we're winning the fight, we're winning the battle. It's not 22, it's 20. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. And it's just, that's the accurate number. But to get to more specific, when you hear the number 20 for veterans dying by suicide, includes both veterans and current service members. We're just talking about the VA definition of veterans, and that's just for pure statistic purposes. That means for those who have previously served and have been federally activated. So that does not include guardsmen and reservists who have not been put on Title 10 orders. So really the numbers aren't as accurate, but we have to define them some way, and that's how the VA chooses to currently define them. So when you weight the numbers, it's actually 17.6. I don't think that's going to be on jeopardy anytime soon, but when we get our nerds back to the nerderies calculating all the data, that's what it is. It's 17.6. Veterans are more likely to use firearms, as I just mentioned. I do a lot of presentations with law enforcement, and we have to have a serious talk about this, because with the veteran suicide, and it's not covered in this presentation, some veterans have, a moral disposition not to take their own lives, but they have no problem utilizing other people to execute that mission. And that turns into engaging with law enforcement. So, I don't know how that's going to shape the data moving forward, but that is an uptick in a trend that we are seeing. And that just rolls into something that's, pretty self-explanatory. Suicide is a complex issue, and there's no single cause. With that being said, it's absolutely preventable. It takes, a group, a village, whatever you want to call it, working together to conquer this. Probably heard the statement, suicide's everyone's business. We use it, in the VA, but you don't have to work in suicide prevention or mental health in general to help someone who could be suicidal. The VA suicide prevention goal is to implement a comprehensive public health approach to prevent suicide among all U.S. veterans. And I'm just going to, interject something a little bit different here. There's a zero suicide initiative that a lot of our community partners use, and we adopt that to a degree, but we don't call it that. But that's the goal. And what an endeavor. It's like playing a whack-a-mole game on an unreal platform, because we have no idea where it's coming from most of the time, from a top-down perspective, and we're trying to get a zero sum. That's why it has to be, to use a Navy term, an all hands on deck approach. And that's why we're really reaching out to our community partners, putting on these trainings. The more we can make other people aware, the more that they can see symptoms in veterans and loved ones, the more that they can initiate, getting help for their for their veteran or loved one. So, into that approach, it's a nationwide network of community-based partnerships. We continue to work the model of this public health approach. We are just in the process of hiring 2 more people who their full-time job is going to be out in the community, building coalitions with our community partners. One really strong in the Kent County, Muskegon County area, and out and around, and also down, in the Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, and associated area. And if you worked with veteran issues for a minute, that has not been the VA's stance. The VA, they've been historically like a silo. Like, you want services from the VA, you got to come to Uncle Sugar to come for those services. And, it didn't take us long to realize we were not winning this battle, and we had to reevaluate the landscape and figure out if we're going to get serious about suicide prevention, we have to start, locking arms with our community partners. So some risk and protective factors. Risk factors are characteristics associated with increased likelihood of suicide behavior. Risk factors for suicide include, prior attempts, mental health issues, substance abuse, access to lethal means, a recent loss, financial issues, relationship issues, unemployment, homelessness. The risk can go on and on. When I counsel veterans in individual or in group, I talk to them about knowing differences in behaviors, or soldiers for that matter. if you start to notice differences in behaviors associated with, some of these risks that are on the slide, you need to pay attention, because that's a recipe for a potential downward spiral that could lead towards a suicide attempt. And it can go quickly. I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes. But then there are also some protective factors. These can help offset the risk factors. Access to mental health care, a sense of connectedness, problem solving, spirituality, a mission or purpose, physical health, employment, social and emotional well-being. And some key data points. I kind of touched on these, so I'm not going to dive too deep. Female veterans are approximately 2 times more at risk when compared to non-female veterans. The rate of suicide for male veterans is about 1.5% times higher than compared to non-male or non-veteran males. When it comes to the highest rate for suicide overall, the data shows that males ages 18 to 34 experience the highest rate of suicide, which means they're dying by suicide more frequently. However, male veterans aged 55 and older had the highest count of suicide, just because there's more of that population. And then when it has to do with the method that's most used, 2018 data continues to show that firearms, almost 70% of male veterans' suicide-related deaths come by firearms. It stayed consistent, since the data started rolling out, and it's been consistent in the almost, 20 years that I've been at the VA. And firearms were used for 41.9% of female veterans. So quite a bit lower than males, but then again, the percentage has increased in the past few years. So this next slide shows that you could pretty much put the poisoning, suffocation, and that last box of all others together, and they don't equal firearms. Now, the difficulty that we have is we start going down the road of talking about lethal means reduction with veterans and soldiers, service members for that matter, and they think we want to take away their firearms. That's not the case. I call it the space between, and if we can develop a space between, it saves their lives. So that maybe is storing firearms with a loved one. In some areas, we have good relationships with law enforcement, and the law enforcement allow them to store their firearms just until they can get through whatever it is they're going through. Storing the ammunition away from the firearm, locking the firearm, and then putting the firearm in a safe. So just things of that nature. This pie chart just shows non-veteran and veteran. Well, firearms are the most significant factor with both. Firearms with veterans are drastically, statistically significantly more with veteran suicides. So, I just show these two, not to beat a dead horse, but just to show you how prevalent the firearms are in terms of veteran suicides. So, one would logically think, okay, if we can just reduce that rate from 68 to 58 or 48, bring it down to the non-veteran suicide, how many veterans' lives are going to be saved? A lot. There's also a myth that if somebody wants to die by suicide, there's really nothing that can be done. The reality is, often many things that veterans or people go through is time limited. But if there's a lethal means available, like a firearm, all it takes is pulling back that trigger and it's all over. This slide shows the time decision to action. 24% of people who attempt is less than 5 minutes, 48% less than 20 minutes. 71%, it's less than an hour. And a story I like to tell, I got the veteran's permission to do so, is veteran was actually woke up having a really good day, and by about 9 o'clock in the morning, he was having some issues, going through some relationship and financial problems. By 9 o'clock in the day, he was starting to feel down. By about 9:10, he had walked by his gun cabinet by 2 or 3 times, and by 9:15, he decided he was going to kill himself. And by 9:17, he opened it up, pulled it out, took out a pistol, and pulled the trigger. And thank God it jerked or something, because he didn't kill himself. He did a lot of damage to himself, but he didn't kill himself. But that just goes to show, in a very short duration, he went from having a great day with no intent or purpose on wanting to take his life to, I come from the field artillery world, and we talk about inches and seconds. And that old boy was inches and seconds away from taking his life. And that's the business that we're in when we talk about suicide prevention. So lethal means reduction is a big deal. And this shows that the combination between decision time and the means available is pretty significant. So the greatest evidence that we have that death by suicide is preventable is related to lethal means reduction is actually limiting access to lethal means. The connection between availability of lethal means and death by suicide is simultaneously one of the most powerful, like I mentioned, and one of the most counterintuitive patterns, in the suicide literature. On one hand, reducing suicide access to lethal means is the best supported intervention for suicide prevention. On the other hand, suicide rate could decrease by 31% simply by making it mildly inconvenient, or that it could increase by 20% by publicizing a novel on the method of suicide. It's paradoxical. So how do we figure this out? One example is, I'm sure you guys have heard of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Back in the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco is considered a hot spot. It's like 1,600 people have plummeted to their death since 1937 when it opened. And although construction recently began on a safety net, calls for anti-suicide barriers went unheeded for decades because it didn't look good. The aesthetics were terrible. Among other reasons, critics cited that people would just go someplace else if jumping from the bridge was made more difficult. So in other words, if a person was presented from a relatively easy and highly lethal attempt, they would just simply substitute another site. Well, in 1978, a gentleman tested the outcome in 515 individuals who jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge between 1937 and 1978. Richard Seiden is the individual's name. And he found that over his longitudinal study of 25 years, that 94% of the individuals were either still alive or had died from causes other than suicide. So the conclusions of the research, the findings confirm that previous observations that suicide behavior are crisis-oriented in nature, and people tend not to repeat the behavior. So 90% of those people didn't attempt suicide again because the crisis emerged and they resolved quickly. So what does that mean for us? It means that suicide is preventable, and in many cases, easily preventable with little interest in intervention. It also is important to dispel myths that continued and persistent and limit us from taking lives or saving lives in interest of others. So that is a huge barrier that we're still working with in some arenas. One of the things that we say all the time, we're talking to veterans and service members is you can't unfire a firearm. You might get lucky, and if you ingest pills and we get you to emergent services quick enough, they might be able to pump you out. Or if you cut yourself, we might be able to get you before you bleed out. Man, if you're in this audience and you've ever fired a pistol, pulled the trigger on, a semi-automatic weapon, I mean, it's seconds, less, and it's over. So that's why we just talked about you can't unfire a firearm. And if you'd like to, there's information videos that are really worthwhile, then you can see them at the veteranscrisisline.net website, which is on this slide. Leave it up here for just a second if you want to take that down. So like I said before, lethal means matters. 90% of firearm-related attempts result in death compared to 5 others. Building time and space. So for people in crisis, limiting access may be the single most important factor. So suicide is preventable. We're going to take a look next at some common myths versus realities. So there are people who talk about suicide and they're just seeking attention. I hear this one a lot. So the reality is, no matter how casually or jokingly said, suicide threats should never be ignored, and they may indicate serious suicidal feelings. Someone who talks about suicide provides others with an opportunity to intervene before suicide behaviors occur. On the flip side of that, we also get individuals who come into the VA and maybe they don't get the care they think they should get, or whatever the case may be. And they say, I'm so mad I could just end it, or you'd be sorry if I'm not here again. Well, you might not mean it, but every time I get called in on one of these, I say, ma'am or sir, I got to take you seriously, because we've got 20 veterans a day that are ending their lives, and you're not going to be a statistic. So it can go both ways. It can go from kind of the dark humor and joking to, somebody who might just say it flippantly while they're upset. So, someone could say it 99 times, but it could be that 100th time that they choose to follow through on it. The only one who can really help someone who is suicidal is a mental health counselor or therapist. You don't have to work in mental health to simply help someone who could be suicidal. Just being there for someone to make sure they're not alone could be all the difference in the world. And of course, being able to, look for the warning signs, when someone's possibly suicidal, could be all the difference in the world. Before COVID hit, I would provide a training similar to this to the volunteers who come to the Wyoming VA. They're the ones that the veterans usually see first. They offer guidance on directions for appointments, offer them coffee and donuts. And I tell the volunteers, you never know. You might be the person that is in the crosshairs, or the person that veteran decides they're going to trust to, unload their rucksack on you and talk about, what's going on with them in terms of, their suicidal ideation, and what's going on with, whatever it may be. And, in the military, we like to train to standard before we actually have to get into a situation where we need to use the training. And God forbid you're that person that the veteran comes up to and is talking that they're suicidal, and you just stand there like a deer in the headlights. That's a no-go. So, number one, just being there and listening, and then, having some tools in your toolbox to know what to do. The spiel I gave this weekend on the military side of the house, this statement is not endorsed by the VA. I'll tell you that much. It doesn't matter how much money we pour, how much research that we do. I've been in mental health for quite a while. I've been doing suicide prevention for a minute. And this is a bottom-up solution, with some top-down measures like getting some training. But to make a real dramatic impact, it's, buddies looking after buddies, friends looking after friends, family members, looking out after family members. When you know somebody's going through an ordeal and you notice that, they're not acting the way that they normally act, and you take the time to care and talk and listen, that's really when we're going to make a significant wave and impact. It's not conducting more studies and all the wonderful things that the VA does do, which don't get me wrong, it has its place, and it is wonderful. But really, to get down and make a dramatic impact, it's got to be a bottom up approach with some top down measures. So, it doesn't take, advanced academic degrees to get into the trenches, get your hands dirty, and show somebody that you give a damn and that you care about them, and that you're willing to stand there and listen when they're, getting ready to tell you that they want to end their life. You're not going to judge, and you're going to help them get to the position where they can get some help. So we're going to transition next into getting some tools on how to do that. So at the VA, we use SAVE training. I know some other places in the community, they use like QRP or something similar to that. But we use the SAVE training. And really, that's just an acronym for the signs of suicidal thinking, ask the most important question, validate the veteran's experience, and encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So some signs: hopelessness, feeling like there's no way out, anxiety, agitation, sleeplessness, mood swings, feeling like there's no reason to live, rage or anger, engaging in risky activities without thinking, increase in alcohol or drug use, withdrawing from family or friends. So, there's a lot more to the list than just this. And, you don't need to have all of these marked down in order to, meet the criteria for signs. And what I tell, some other folks is it may be none of those. Sometimes it's somebody makes a decision that they're going to end their life, and they get happier because that burden has been lifted. So, if they roll around like they're Oscar the Grouch 99.9% of the time, and all of a sudden they're rolling around like they're Big Bird, well, that's a change in behavior. So that would raise a red flag to me, saying, hey, they're acting outside of like their normal way of behaving. I want to ask them what's going on. Now, there are some things that may require immediate attention. If they indicate that they're thinking of hurting or killing themselves directly, looking for ways to die, talking about death, dying, or suicide, self-destructive or risk-taking behaviors, especially when it comes to alcohol, drugs, or weapons, those are things that, need to be engaged now. And one other thing that's not on here that I typically throw in, and this really pertains to the veteran community. You're not going to find this in an academic textbook. At least I haven't found it yet. But within the veteran community, this is a group of people who are problem solvers. Most of the world are problem identifiers. So when I talk to a veteran who may be showing signs or maybe have some suicidal ideation, I say, I would expect it. You're going through, this, and this, and you're thinking about ending your life. I'd expect it. Now, the reason why I say that is because veterans are trained to be problem solvers, they're going to come up with multiple avenues of approach to solve a problem. And so I validate that training and experience that they have, but notify and indicate that, I would expect that you'd go down that avenue, but there's probably like 3 or 4 or 20 other avenues that are better. But what I've found is by validating the fact that they've gone down that lets them breathe a little bit easier. Now, I've been doing this for a while, so I'm not saying, you know, go out and say, oh, you're thinking about killing yourself. Hey, great, right on, awesome. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that you got to know who you're talking to and understand that most veterans will not only identify they have a problem, but also identify how to solve problems. And, you know, it's a permanent way to solve whatever problem that they're going through, but it is a way to solve it nonetheless. So just kind of something to keep on the back burner. So if you don't get anything out of this training, get this one out of the training, this one right here. Know how to ask the most important question of all. Are you thinking of killing yourself? I probably ask this question at a minimum of 20 times a day. And I ask it just like this. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't dink around with it. I don't use vague phrases. And when I teach it, just like I'm teaching it to you guys right now, I teach it just like this. Because if you use a phrase of like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Well, if you're dealing with somebody who's a cutter, that means something different than killing yourself, because people who cut to make themselves feel better, not necessarily to kill themselves. So we have to be intentional on the words that we use, because words matter. So something along the lines of, are you thinking of suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of ending your life? But the more direct, the better. So asking the question, do ask the question if you've identified warning signs. Ask the question in a natural way that flows with the conversation. That's why you kind of got to ask it, think about it, like before you get smacked in the face with somebody who's, you know, clearly identifying as somebody who may be, you know, suicidal. Don't ask the question as though you're looking for a no answer. You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? I haven't seen this one lately, but there was a little time period where I'd actually get this from doctors, like primary care providers. Because once a veteran identifies themselves as suicidal, it's a game changer, because now certain other measures have to go into place. So, you know, they want to pass a suicidal veteran off to a mental health provider like a hot potato. So, you know, asking that double negative is not a good idea. And then don't wait till they're like walking away and haphazardly ask the question. You know, just a genuine way, like you care. You know, because I'm sure most of you know, you're working with the veteran community or part of the veteran community. Most veterans are black and white thinkers, all or nothing thinkers. You usually get like one shot with these folks, us folks, these folks, our folks. And if you screw it up, you're out. And if they trust you enough to ask you or talk to you about this, that means something. That means something really significant. So I'm going to use a non-academic talk right here. Don't screw this part up. So be willing to ask the tough question, because they came to you with something really tough and they trust you enough to open up and talk about it. Then the V is validate. Talk openly. Be willing to listen and allow the veteran to express their feelings. Also recognizes the situation is serious, and don't pass judgment. You know, reassure that, you know, help is available. And, you know, going back up to the don't pass judgment, you say, oh, you really can't be thinking of that, or, you know, try to minimize what they're doing, you know, things of that nature, because it really will, you know, enhance, you know, feelings of shame and guilt and things like that.
All right, no problem. All right, good.
I think somebody's got a hot mic. Harold, your mic's on.
The choir comes.
1 second, guys. I'm working on access to mute his mic.
Oh, okay. Then I said, well, what about the doors? And she said, well, what time? We agreed on about 5 o'clock thing. And so she's gonna leave the doors open at 5. I don't know if that's all on the electronic thing anymore or what.
Sorry, guys. 1 moment. We're working on that.
Well,
Sorry.
then I need to change because
All right. He is muted now. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Derek.
No problem. Okay, so the E is encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So what should you do if you think somebody's suicidal? Probably the worst thing you can do is keep it a secret. Because just think about it. If you promise you're not going to tell anybody and then that veteran goes off and they kill themselves, well, enjoy keeping that secret with you for the rest of your life. That would then turn into what we would call survivor's guilt. And that is a counseling session series and it's of its own. Don't leave them alone either. Try to get the person to seek immediate help. Call 911. Reassure that the veteran that help is possible. You call a crisis line and press 1, and they can actually work with you to get help, whether that's a wellness check, whether that's getting law enforcement to come over. Tell you the truth, I had to do one of these. What is today? Today's Thursday. I had to do one of these on Tuesday night, and one of my service members shot off a text message. Something's not going right in her military career. She's got some adversity, and 9:30 at night, we get a parasuicidal doggone text message, and we have to act. And I didn't engage a crisis line, but I reached out to county law enforcement to do a wellness check. And you can't. Yeah, I could have just said, oh, hope for the best and hope I'll reach out to her tomorrow and hope she'll be there. But just think if she'd have killed herself that night. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. And also knowing that the person may temporarily get pissed at you. And, you may have to deal with the fallout for that, but I kind of take a mini cost benefits analysis and say, okay, you can be pissed at me and be alive, then, me keeping your secret of you wanting to kill yourself and you're dead. So I'll take you being pissed at me and hopefully we can work it out down the road. And you're still alive. So just some things to think about. When talking to a veteran, try to remain calm. So if you can model a calm, soothing tone, because they're probably the more they start talking about it, the more emotionally charged they're going to get. Try to listen more than you speak. Odds are you're probably the first person they're going to vomit this all out to. And sometimes they just need to get it out. Maintain eye contact. Don't argue with them. Use open body language. Limit questions. Use supportive, encouraging comments, and be honest. There are no quick solutions like yesterday, but help is available. Maintain a relaxed posture. You want to try to model the calmness, the tone in your voice, and the body posture and behavior that you want them to display also. So just remember the signs. Ask, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of ending your life? Are you thinking of completing suicide? Validate the veteran's experience and encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So I'm just going to move into some resources and the references, and then I'll open it up for some questions and concerns. So there is a modified version of this training online with Psych Armor. You can go through it and it just reinforces what we've covered today. It's psycharmorinstitute.org. To develop a general understanding, how to identify and know what to do. This is just our attempt to get the training out to more people. A lot of VA resources. Make the connection. A lot of online resources for family members and friends. Coaching into care. One of our training centers out west in the Utah area of the Myrack VA has a coaching into care program. It's a telephone service for family members and friends. The number and website are right there. And for PTSD, each VA medical center has a PTSD specialist to provide treatment for veterans. And I've got my contact information on the last slide if you have questions specifically about the Battle Creek VA in terms of suicide prevention or PTSD. The PTSD Coach App, that is a wonderful tool. I know this is a little bit of a pivot from suicide prevention, but the two are usually linked to some degree. There's usually tools for emotional regulation, and that's a really good app you can put right on your phone. It's a free download. And again, the crisis line, you can call the crisis line as a third party if you have a question about a veteran. Family members can call it, service members, guard members, like I said, who have not been placed on Title 10 orders, who have not deployed, who wouldn't be considered, air quotes, veterans in the normal VA sense of the term, can call. Friends can call. I respond to, I've got a reoccurring call with a veteran who calls the crisis line because he needs help dealing with his landlord. So he calls the crisis line because he knows I'm going to follow up with him, and he needs help dealing with his landlord. So he calls the crisis line. I follow up with him, and that's how me and Mr. C have been rolling for about the past 9 months. And you know what? To him, that's a crisis, because if he gets that housing taken away, he's going to be homeless. So I salute, I execute, I help him to the best of my ability. And, in his world, that's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. So, that's part of the reason why we pivoted away from calling it the Veterans Crisis Line, or the Veterans Suicide Line, to the Veterans Crisis Line. And then kind of our initiative is the Be There campaign. The call or text, community engagement. It's a simple act. You can kind of show veterans and the community that you're there. We also have a veteran outreach toolkit. Toolkit's available at that website. When I present to law enforcement officers and first responders, I do spend some time talking to them about how to talk to veterans about their military service. Or, I think Chaplain Lepley's putting on the military culture training. A lot of civilians don't recognize we have our own culture. And I do an 8-hour training on culture, and I open up the first 10 minutes speaking only in military acronyms. And so, the participants they think I'm speaking in Japanese or, something. I mean, they can pick out some words, but it's a total different world. And just some pockets of the community are just not aware that, we are our own culture. Helping veterans feel more connected. And, the outreach toolkit helps joining public-private partnerships. And there's also a community provider toolkit. And you'll be seeing this a lot more from us being the Battle Creek VA, as the Suicide Prevention 2.0 public health initiative starts rolling out here in the latter parts of 2021. As we start seeking more and strengthening more our public-private partnerships. So, I want to thank you for allowing me to come in and present today on a topic that, in these kind of platforms, isn't overly, exciting or, is engaging, but necessary. So I just like to take this time to open it up, and see, if you guys have any questions, concerns, and comments, I'll do my best to answer. But I'd like to take the next few minutes that we have left here, and if you have any questions VA related, I'll do my best to answer. But I call this time the free fire area. So if you got any questions or concerns, we're gonna have a go. So I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm the new Vet Success Coordinator, Project Director at Grand Rapids Community College. And from my experience, I'm a veteran as well. So thank you for your service. I sometimes we come in contact with students who just come to class and probably come to the resource center to, decompress, relax, or do things like that. And you may have mentioned that. It may have been in one of your slides. I just want to know if you could provide some insight on those warning signs from students who are not really standoffish, not quiet, very engaging, but yet they have those thoughts of not living anymore or just wanting to give up.
So, Patrick, thank you so much for bringing this up. This is actually a very big concern. I spent quite a few years as a mental health therapist at the Grand Rapids Vet Center, doing counseling for combat veterans. And this is where I saw the problem kind of manifest the first time. A lot of service members get off active duty and they want to use their GI Bill. They want to go back to school. They want to, amplify what they've done in the military or change directions or whatever. However, they're not ready to go back to school, or they can't find a job when they get out and they want to use that stipend that they get to live off of. And they really have no business going to school. So what happens is things are all nice and awesome until about the midterms hit. And then reality starts smacking them right in the face. And they realize, if I flunk this class, if I have to drop out of school, I got to pay Uncle Sugar back. Am I right, Patrick?
You know it.
Okay, so now we've got a whole nother set of issues. Now they're looking at paying back the loan, flunking out of school, probably an increase in stressors at home. Well, now you've got a recipe for suicidal ideation.
Right.
So it's all those upticks. And I encouraged veterans that I worked with during my time at the vet center to stay engaged in counseling while they were in school, for no other reason than just to help mitigate the normal natural stressors that most students have as they try to navigate through, the roller coaster that is a semester. I've been teaching graduate level social work at Grand Valley for a decade, and non-veteran students are stressed out. Well, you put veteran related issues on top of being a student, and then you put some maybe combat related issues on top of that. It's just a recipe for a potential, suicide ideation at least. And then it can just turn out to be just a mess.
Right.
And, we try to encourage veterans to mitigate that before, the midterm point, before the finals point, before things can't be undone. So I hope I answered your question. I look at it from students' perspectives, more of timelines. So trying to reach out to them in the beginning of the semester, knowing that those certain timelines where they can't drop anymore, midterms, finals, because those are deadline stressors that toothpaste is now out of the tube and you can't put it back in once those hard times are past. And that's where, those stressors become real. So I look, when talking to students, more of those hard deadlines than the stressors, and go from there.
Well, I'm thinking, Derek, I'm thinking about doing, once, my office is done and we get on campus and we're rolling. I'm thinking about doing a joint orientation and cover just what you said. When they get to those stressors, they get to those midterms, finals, when the pressure start hitting, I want to cover that in the orientation. I want to cover that kind of like mid-semester. When we get close to the finals, I want to cover that again, so they don't make that decision, but they know they have an outlet, which is in the resource center on campus. So and again, I just wanted to, so I can share that with my team and let them know, if you see these indicators, then we need to go ahead and like either have somebody on campus come in and talk to them, or kind of make recommendations to, go speak to someone at the VA. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, and you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can help connect you with
Okay.
our partners at the vet center. They do a wonderful job reaching out. We're getting ready to hire two folks that are going to work directly in the community out of our office. And I'm up in your area, so now that COVID restrictions are kind of getting relaxed a little bit,
Right.
we're able to get out and do a lot more engagement. So feel free to reach out.
I will. I'd love for you to come and just speak once we get going. Love for you to come in and speak to the orientated students before class start.
Absolutely. And just one other thing, if you do have veterans who have the PTSD diagnosis, they have the mindset that they can just ruck it up, suck it up, move out and draw fire. Well, the nomenclature there is post-traumatic stress disorder, which means they don't handle stress the way they normally do. And once the stress level starts to go up, maladaptive coping skills usually start to take form. So another part of that is just reinforcing the counseling, the education piece, and let them know that because of the traumatic experiences that they've witnessed, they just typically don't handle stress, the way they did prior to the trauma. So,
Right.
Yep. Thank you for the question. That's a really good question.
I appreciate it.
So my name is Shane Reich. I'm with Ottawa County Sheriff's Office. So we have a policy with anybody going through like a crisis that we take them to, obviously, like one of the Holland Community Hospital, Zeeland Community Hospital, any of those. We've been having an influx of vet crises, and I'm a vet, so I requested the department to actually create a position for me to be the vet crisis kind of liaison. Our policy, like I said, we take them, whether it be by ambulance or ourselves, to one of those hospitals. If they're VA, going on VA benefits, does the VA have any recommendation on which hospital, or if you're even okay with us bringing them to like one of the outpatient centers from the VA?
Ooh. Did I call you Shane? Is that okay?
That's good. Yep.
All right, Shane, you just stepped into a big pile of dog crap. I don't
figured.
know. I don't know any other way to say it. This is a mess.
Right.
So I work with folks at Metro, because that's the hospital right next to the Wyoming clinic. And
Right.
I actually work at Mercy
Okay.
in the emergency department. And the problem is, if you take a veteran to the Muskegon outpatient clinic, let's just say,
Right.
there's not much that they can do there.
Right.
Okay. Let's say you take them to the Wyoming clinic. If it's 2:30 in the afternoon or late, let's say it's 3 o'clock or later, they're going to send them to Metro.
Right.
You take them to Noach, you take them to Mercy. The VA, trying to get into the VA is like trying to juggle daggers while you're tightrope walking on fire.
Right.
It's not easy.
That's what I've been dealing with, because if somebody's on Medicaid and all that, that kind of
That's
streamlines
great.
it for us.
Yeah, no problem.
But when they're not on, I run into the vets that aren't on Medicaid and they're just going through like the VA benefits. I was trying to get some answers so I could give them, so they're not worried about like all those copay, that type of stuff.
So this is what I'm doing with my colleagues at Mercy. So they have a green light to reach out to me anytime they want. And what I do is I get a report at like 10 o'clock in the morning that indicates who has beds available within the VA. So we are like a region, but we call our region a VISN. And so that's Battle Creek, Detroit, Ann Arbor,
Right.
Indianapolis. So if the veteran wants to use their VA benefits, they're going to have to go to one of those facilities. And I'm going to tell you that we just got off one-to-one diversion, which means it's a veteran who needs somebody to watch them if they're suicidal. We just got off one-to-one diversion for the first time in about 2 months last night. And I think we just went back on it this morning. So we're short-staffed as most people are who have psychiatric needs. So it's difficult to get into the Battle Creek VA at times.
Right.
So your best bet is to get them to a local hospital and then have the local social workers there start that
process through like Pine Rest or whatnot.
process.
Okay.
Well, start the process going through one of the VAs.
Right.
And you can feel free to give them my contact information. Because what I did for the folks at Mercy is I gave them direct contacts to the hospitals in our visit. So Battle Creek's full, they can call Detroit. Detroit's full, they can call Ann Arbor, North Indy, and Indianapolis to try to get the veteran into an inpatient facility if that's what the veteran wants to do.
Okay.
But be advised, if the veteran doesn't want to go to like Detroit and Detroit has a bed open, well, this isn't Burger King. And the
Right.
veteran is not going to have it his way.
Right.
So,
Right.
You know, if the veteran wants to go to Pine Rest instead of Detroit and Detroit has a bed open, I would probably advise the veteran against that unless, you know, they got about 30 or 50 grand that they
Right.
want to donate to the Pine
Right.
Rest fund.
Right.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk with the department, see if we can update some of our policies with that.
yeah, good question. And it's a battle. I mean, it's not,
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Just trying to connect dots with more community stuff and whatnot, so we're not just taking them to Noach or whatnot and dropping
yeah.
them there.
And to be honest with you, if you pick up a veteran who is suicidal, depending on where you're at in your county, I would take them right down to urgent care at Battle
Right.
Creek.
Right.
If you can get them down to urgent care in Battle Creek, then the VA will deal with the veteran in terms of getting them assessed.
Streamline that
and-
process.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that. That would probably be easiest for us because we're only about an hour and a half, 2 hours away tops, so from Battle
Yep.
Creek. So we could probably look into that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Oh, there's chat.
Chat was just me, Derek, just taking this time to remind everyone, if you are here for the continuing education credits, you do need to fill out that survey link that is attached to the
Oh, okay.
chat. In order to get the credits, we do need a survey to be able to send you the certificate of completion. So just a friendly reminder, make sure you check out that link. We love all feedback, but they are mandatory for the CEUs.
And where is that link going to be?
It's right there in that chat box. So if you click the button that says chat, it should pop up and there's a link right there for you.
Oh,
I can
okay,
also send
great,
it directly to you as well.
great.
And
Thanks.
then another friendly reminder, we keep going with the Q&As, guys. But after this, the next time we are meeting is the 1 o'clock meeting for the second round with Dr. Brock. And you can find those links on your email for the digital conference guide as well.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Y'all have a good day. We'll see you after
Yeah.
lunch.
All right.
Have a good lunch.